Well, welcome to this episode of Wealth Coherence, where we explore the purpose of life and how to live it in a way that's really meaningful and coherent in all aspects of life. And I'm so thrilled to get to introduce you today to Mark Crowley, a celebrated author and speaker and a thought leader in the area of leadership and coherence. And I would love, Mark, for you to introduce yourself and share with us a little bit about your journey and how you were able to bring the whole conversation of heart into business.
You have no idea how big of a question that is for me. I'm not kidding. I'm like, oh, please don't ask it that way, because I could take, hours and explain it to you. First of all, hello, and thank you for
Hi,
having me. I really
so glad
appreciate
you're here.
it. So interestingly, you can see the progression. There's three books behind me, and so I'll get to those in a second here. But I had, it's going to sound like, oh man, he's going to go way back, but I need to go way back into my childhood to tell you that
Mhm.
my mom died when I was 9. My father was having an affair with the woman they ended up marrying. He was a psychologically, emotionally abusive person, as was she.
Wow.
And then when I graduated from high school, 2 days later, they kicked me out of the house with no money, no support. Never went back for a holiday, birthday, Christmas. I saw my dad 3 or 4 times before he died, about 15 years later. So he
Oh
effectively,
wait, you
go ahead.
you have to pause for a second because my heart just completely broke, and I just appreciate you choosing to share that because you are one of the most heart-centered professionals in the business space I've met, and it's so profound that you're willing and choosing to share that it's coming from that kind of place with where those wounds can have us motivated to bring the heart to our relating. So thank you for that. And thank you for letting me
Thank you.
pause it. Because
I'll be honest with you. I've had some spiritual advisors who insisted that I tell the story, and I was like, I'm just going to speak in the vernacular here. Like, no effing way am I going to tell this story when I speak or even in my
yeah.
book. And they were like, no, that's what you have to tell because that's what people are going to be able to relate to.
Oh,
And so it was
absolutely.
many times, I lost it. Like when I first doing it on stage and telling the whole story, you're reliving it. When you're reliving it, you're feeling it emotionally. And when you're feeling it emotionally, it's hard to keep, it was for me, but I've
Well,
done
yeah,
it in,
that's that incoherent state, right? You're going into the trauma and then the incoherence will happen internally. Absolutely. It's going to have an
complete,
impact. Yeah.
complete.
Wow.
So I went through a really difficult period because, by the way, my dad was a super successful businessman and was very wealthy and easily could have paid to support me going through college, pay my tuition. He did none of that. So he used to tell me that I would be an abject failure and never succeed in life. That was sort of the mantra around the house in my childhood. And so when he kicked me out of the house, when I now tied my arms behind my back, no financial support, no stability. My inner voice said, if you don't graduate from college by hook or by crook, you are going to end up being the failure he said he was. So it was binary. You got to do it no matter what. So
Wow.
it took me almost 6 years to graduate. I ended up graduating from one of the top public schools in the country. And by the time it was all said and done, I was getting honors. They should have kicked me out the first couple of years and can't even explain why they didn't. But I figured it out. I got work, I went to school, I studied hard, I did it all, and I graduated. But when I graduated, I started talking to the people around me and saying, well, what are you doing now? And they're like, oh, I'm going to Harvard Business School, or I'm going to medical school, or I'm,
Mhm.
going to law school. And I'm feeling I'm so lucky just to have gotten through all of this and not realizing, Emily, that what I just went through was far more difficult as a challenge to graduate than anything they had.
Yeah.
Nobody, I had no family, no stability, nothing. And so I started thinking, okay, so you guys are all this optimistic. I wouldn't even have thought to apply to a graduate school. Like, why me? Who me? The voice of my father's still there.
Mhm.
And I started to think about, well, what's the difference between these people and me? And I realized that their upbringing, how they were, raised, they were loved for one, right? They had a place to go home to. They had people asking how you doing and congratulations when you do well on a paper and encourage when you get a bad grade on a paper
Mm.
or an exam. And people are there for you, right?
Mm.
And you're not waking up every morning thinking if my car
Yeah.
breaks down, this is my demise. And
Mhm.
so I can't explain what happened, But when I got into business and I started managing people, I had a unconscious, later conscious fantasy that what if I gave people everything that I always wanted and never got? And what would
Oh.
happen to their performance? And so I started caring about everyone who worked with me. I saw their potential. I made them feel safe around me, so they knew. Like if you're not doing good work, I will tell you. In the absence of me telling you doing bad work, you can assume you're doing good work. I'll tell you you're doing good work, but I don't want you ever going home worried that that we have a bad relationship or you're going to get fired or whatever the fantasies are. And I just grew people, developed them. I saw their potential, gave them chances to grow, promoted people when I could. And every team that I managed thrived and outperformed peers when I had them. So, long story short, 20 years into my career, I'm 43 years old, and a woman who had worked for me for 20 years said to me very directly, almost like accusatorily, you manage people very differently than anybody else around you, don't you? And I think I was just sort of figuring it out. But I said, well, what do you mean? And she started to give me examples of things that I did. And my peers were all managing people under fear and intimidation. If you don't hit your goals, you're
Mhm.
going to lose your job. So, I'm going to be mad. The boogeyman's going to come after you, and it's intimidating people. And I'm doing it by caring about people and supporting people and making people feel optimistic about hitting their goals. And of course they did. And so she started telling me stories about what I had done. And she had a unique point of view because she'd worked for me for so long. And when she started telling me these stories, Emily, I realized, like an epiphany, this is all because of my upbringing. So when
Wow.
you said, proud of
Mhm.
you, congratulations for what you did, I'm also intellectually capable of seeing that I couldn't be here talking to you if I hadn't had that really shitty
Mhm.
childhood, all those experiences
Mhm.
and abuse. So I'm not thinking I'm going to write a book. I'm not thinking we're going to be talking. I just realized I want to be better at this. I want to refine this. So I
Mhm.
started practicing and, turning the knobs, a little bit of bass, a little bit of treble, a little bit of volume, seeing how these practices could work better. So I perfected them. And then it turns out the company that I was working for got bought out, and the people that I was now working for were repelled me. So I stayed for 6 months, decided I was going to leave. I left and then made the decision that I was going to write a book. So in about 10 months, I pretty much had a whole outline of what became the second half of the Red Book. And basically, what I was going to do was to say, these practices, if you adopt them, if you do all of them in aggregate, you will get the same results I got. A
Mhm.
friend of mine who was following my process, who I used to work with, said, are you going to explain why all of this works? And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, well, people are going to think you need a shitty childhood in order to lead this way. He goes, you're going to need some research to validate why people scaled mountains for you. And Emily, I'd never given it a second of thought. And I
Mhm.
realized I'm kind of screwed here because I think I'm ready to write a book and I'm not. So I took another year, but before I did, I sat just where I am looking out my window, just like, what was it that made people perform this way with such loyalty and such extraordinary performance? And it hit me. I was affecting the hearts of people. And it
Yeah.
was euphoric and like what a profound thing to realize that I was affecting people so deeply that they would want to reciprocate and do good work for me. And then almost instantaneously, I realized I'm really doomed because the people that I've worked with my entire career are going to hear lead from the heart or something like it and go, did he have a religious breakdown or a mental breakdown? I mean, we don't bring heart into business. So I told my wife, I've wasted about 10 months of my life here thinking about writing this book, and I'm going to go back to work. And she said, but haven't you already proved it? Don't you already know it intimately from your own direct experience? And I go, yeah. She goes, well, then go find research. And it was just so instantaneously. It was like, okay, brush yourself off, go do it. So
Mhm.
I spent a year looking for research, but here's where the punchline is relative to this conversation in your podcast. I wrote a world class cardiosurgeon, Dr. Mimi Ganeri, and I just told her what my experience was. And she happened to be in La Jolla, where I live, so I could go see her. And she welcomed me. She invited me almost instantaneously. And I said, I'm looking to see if medical science can validate my experience. Is there any science that proves that I could have been affecting the hearts in people? Literally, not metaphorically. And I walked into her office and she said, Mr. Crowley, you're figuring out something we've just figured out in medicine. I'm just figuring out in medicine. I had tears coming down my eyes because I'm realizing this woman is
Mm.
about to validate my whole life experience. And she said, I went to medical school. She graduated from one of the SUNY schools, State University of New York,
Mhm.
medical school, graduated top of her class. So she's a really talented, super person. And she said, when we went through medical school, we're working on cadavers for the first time, and all of the students were like squeamish about touching the heart. I was like, that's their higher self. That's something spiritual. There's something special about the heart. And the doctors that were teaching in the medical school were saying, it's just a carburetor. Don't get caught up in that. It's just a blood pump. And she said, but when I started to treat, patients, to do stents and surgery on their hearts, I started to ask people what was going on in their life and who are they. And she said the common denominator was, I'm having financial problems. I'm having health problems. I'm having a bad marriage. I have a very stressful boss. Something bad was going on in their life. And she said, if their biography was affecting their biology, that could never be the truth if we're talking about a carburetor. The heart has to be a feeling sensing organ. So she then introduced me. She said, I'm going to roll out the mat to you to an organization that I bet your listeners are familiar with. I know you are, the Institute of Heart Math. And
Yep.
she said, they will help you because they're on this path. They're looking into the intelligence of the heart. There's no other organization like them. And so I
Um,
read her book. I read another genius book on the heart, and then met with Bruce Cryer, who was one of the founders, who's a friend of yours. And he mentored me and said, you're on it, and I'm going to help you, give you what we've learned. And that became the science that I put into my book. And then I rewrote the book
love it.
11 years later.
You know what's amazing about what you're saying in this story is a feature that happens when we are in a place of coherence, when we're really crystal clear, like you had that euphoric moment, like, oh my gosh, I could be impacting people's hearts. It's like we're so on target with our purpose and why we're here and what is it about our lives that matter, that it just opens the door to these unbelievable synchronicities and connectivity. And you your wife is aware enough to say do some research, and then you find a scientist in your neighborhood who can tell you that they're exactly at the same point with the same question, looking at how to prove it. And then they're able to introduce you to Heart Math Institute. That's their entire existence is to prove the heart rate and that coherence that we can have in our heart can make such a huge impact in our lives and the lives of the people around us. So I think that's extraordinary that you're like a living example of what happens when we are not on purpose, and it doesn't matter what our
There's no
beginnings are,
question that the synchronicities that I've experienced and continue to experience have some, I can't explain it except to say that I've been open to them and I'm
Mm-hmm.
never surprised by them. But there's
Yeah.
another interesting aspect of coherence that Dr. Roland McCready, who's the head scientist and co-founder again of HeartMath.
Mm-hmm.
So he said to me, so I told him what my whole experience was. And he goes, whether you knew what you were doing or not, as a leader, when I was, just coming up and giving people what I always wanted and never got, he said, you could not have done any better in terms of setting people up for optimal performance. And he said that we are, and there's just been so much more research that has come out to validate what Roland told me probably 9, 10, 11 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
that when we have a disproportionate amount of or disproportionate ratio of positive to negative emotions in our daily experience, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, something like that, even
Mm-hmm.
better. He said every time you were coaching someone or telling you that you appreciated them or making them feel safe, you're dripping on them positive emotions. And when we have like a very high ratio of positive to negative emotions, the heart and the mind go into coherence, setting people up for optimal performance. And so that formed my entire leadership philosophy, or confirmed it.